Hey there, Boone Meadow artists. Mrs. T here. Welcome back to the art room. For today's lesson, we are going to be talking about the artist Jasper Johns. Jasper Johns is still alive and still creating art. Some of the things that are really cool about him, one is that he, in the late 1950s and the 1960s, he was not afraid to create art that represented something, meaning it was representational, so it was known to the viewers. One of his most famous paintings is that of the American flag. Well, pretty much everyone, whether you live in the United States or not, recognize the American flag. So, other examples of his representational art, a target, which is one of the projects that we're going to be doing today. There's numbers, letters, all things that are just easy for the viewer to relate to. Another thing that's really cool about Jasper Johns is he created art through many movements, and he was able to adapt to those movements. He worked through and was able to be a part of the pop art movement, conceptual art, minimalism, even performance art. He wasn't just a painter, he was also a sculptor, and he actually was roommates and very good friends with Rauschenberg, whom is an amazing abstract sculptor artist. So today, he's still creating, and his work is identified more as complex art. He likes layers, and it's really interesting some of his more modern art that he's working on, and how he is layering materials. One of the really cool things that he had said at some point was he wants his viewers to always look and think at his work. And when he talks about looking at his work, he wants you to really look at it so that we as the viewer can complete the work ourselves. Meaning, when we look at this target, when he was creating it, he of course had his own emotional attachment. He had his own visual as to what he was trying to communicate to his viewers. But what he wants you to do is to look at the target, think about the target, and then he wants you in your mind to complete it for yourself. He wants you to attach to it to give it its own meaning. It doesn't have to match what he meant by what he created. He wants you to create your own, which I think is awesome. And I think I like that about my work too. I think in a lot of my sculptures, what I envision is very different from what other viewers envision. However, there's plenty of times where myself and my viewers see the same thing, interpret it the same way, but most of the time we interpret it in different ways, which I think is really fun when it comes to art. So let's get started on our project. So this here is our final piece. The materials you're going to need, there's quite a bit. You're going to need newspaper. So just scrap newspaper that you have lying around. What I did was I tore mine up into small pieces, and I just have them in a little bucket here, and I have a lid for it, and then that way I'll label it newspaper, and I know I've already got pre-cut or pre-ripped newspapers for the future. So you're going to need newspaper. You are going to need glue. This is kind of open-ended. You can use, if you have Mod Podge available to you, you can use that. You can use clear glue. You can use white Elmer's glue. I was pretty low on white Elmer's glue, so what I ended up doing, you won't want to do this without adult permission and supervision, I cut my glue bottle open and then allowed for all that was in there to drip into a little bucket with a lid, because I actually have a designated paintbrush. It's just an old firm bristled brush. This is my glue brush, and I know that because I labeled it glue. And I use this to, glue down. I also use my Mod Podge with it. So I have a whole set of brushes that are just designated for adhesive, projects. I do wash it and reuse it. Sometimes, depending on the adhesive I use, I can't get it washed and then I throw it away. So they're not expensive brushes, but I do have them designated because if there are any dry bits of glue within the bristles, you don't then want to use it into paint and other mediums. You don't want to cross mix your mediums. So you're also going to need a piece of paper. Now for this one, I used a square piece of paper. It was a thicker piece of cardstock kind of thing. It was actually scrapbook paper, and so it's thicker. If you only have, your regular traditional rectangle, that's fine. You can use that too. If you do have cardstock though, which is a little bit of a thicker paper, that will be better only because we're using so much glue. Regardless of the type of paper you use, you're going to get little ripples and stuff in your paper, which, in my opinion, adds a little character and texture to it. So I started already putting some glue on paper on this one, but we're going to work on this and keep going. So you need your glues, you need newspaper, you need your paper. You are also going to need and want some newspaper underneath your workspace because you are using glue. I also have pencil and eraser. I have a black marker, a compass, or if you have lids to create your circles, because we are working with a target, so you're going to need to make circles. But if you don't have a compass, maybe you have the homemade one. If you haven't made the homemade one, you can always still go to the enrichment page and make your own compass. Or, as always, you can use circle stencils. If you have lids laying around or bowls or buckets or whatever that have good circles that you can just trace with a pencil. Do not trace any of those kind of things with marker because they'll leave marks. And then your finishing color touch. If you have tempera paint, that may work the best. I used our homemade watercolor, and it gave kind of, if you can see in a way, some really interesting powdered finish on it. I personally love it because it adds an element of texture. If you have classroom watercolor or just regular store-bought watercolor, that's going to work wonderfully. I'm thinking that the white powdery finish is from the homemade watercolors that we made. Again, I love it. You may or may not get that finish. I do not know. That's the only thing I can assume is that it's from the watercolor. If you want to finish it with marker or oil pastel or crayon, you can do any of those as well. Marker, oil pastel, and crayon may not give you the same visual finish because you may not be able to see the newspaper as much, but it's up to you however you want to add your color. So let's get going. To start, all you're going to need is your blank piece of paper, your newspaper, and your glue. I will say this is more or less a 2-day project. The only way to avoid it from being a 2-day project is if you fast forward the glue drying process. In order to fast forward the glue drying process, you would simply just take a hair dryer and patiently use the blow dryer over the glue so that it dries faster, and that way then you can continue on with the project. A 2-day project isn't necessarily a bad thing, but maybe you just want to start it and get it done all in the same day, and that's fine. Just use a hair dryer. Or if you don't have a hair dryer, it is a sunny day, you can put it outside in the sun, play outside for a while, and then check it periodically, and when it's dry, keep going. So we are going to go ahead. Now, like I said, I put the white glue in a little cup with a lid, and I have a paintbrush. If you don't have that, you can simply use your glue, put it down, and then use a paintbrush to move it around. If you don't have a paintbrush that you can designate to this task, it's not going to be clean, but you are welcome to use your finger You can use your finger to kind of spread out. But what I do is I first put down a layer of glue. All right. I find this to be the easiest. Sometimes they'll say to, put it in your hand, put the glue on the newspaper, put that down and then add more glue. I think that's multi-steps and gets you really messy. And then I just lay down randomly. There's no rhyme or reason. This is just like a collage of newspaper. So you're just placing it down where you just put your glue. Then take your glue again and you are going to paint right over the pieces you just laid down. So you're working in small sections because the glue will probably start its drying process. So you want to make sure that you get it kind of sealed down as quickly as possible. And if you do it this way, you know that you cover both the top and the bottom with glue. All right. The goal is to cover your entire page with that glue. For the sake of speed, I am going to move on to a piece I already have completely covered. I did this yesterday. So theoretically you can't see the paper. There are a couple spots, but that's always okay. We are going to next draw a circle, or the circles, our target on our paper. So I'm going to start. You can use a ruler to find your center. I'm just going to guess. But you want to start with your biggest circle, and then you want to make sure that biggest circle won't run off your paper. Once you have that, go ahead and draw your circles. Now it is on messy newspaper, so it might be a challenge to kind of get it drawn. Then, just shrink your compass and add in your next circle. Now, if you notice, I did not pick up my compass. If you did, because of the newspaper, it typically will leave you a little divot hole, so it should be pretty easy to find the new one. And then I'm going to add one more circle. So in this target, it has the center, and then I have two outer layers. You can do more on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You can only fit so much. The next step was I went ahead and I outlined my circles in black lines, mainly just because on all this newspaper, it's really hard to see the circles. You do not have to do this step, but I did. And when I painted in the end, I really like that black line. And because I used watercolor, it made the black marker bleed a little bit, which just for myself, I kind of enjoyed that. So I'm just going to quickly outline my circles. Now, even though you are using a compass, I'd still recommend using a pencil first and then going back over with a marker, just because even with the compass, like if you've worked with it before, you know that it can be kind of temperamental, and sometimes it slips, the paper slips, the pivot point slips, and it screws up your circle. So, and with pencil, you can go back and erase it and start over, just be gentle if you have to erase on the newspaper. So the next step, think about your colors. How do you want to color it? Now, Jasper Johns, in his original target, he used primary colors. So you can stick to that, use primary colors. You can do any color scheme you want. I know that everybody tends to love rainbows, so this one I finished with rainbows. I started in the middle with violet, blue, green, yellow, and then, I ran out of spots, of course, so I did like red over here, and then I did orange, and I kind of let them bleed together right over here. So be creative in your colors. If you are going to use watercolor, know that again, if it's store-bought, you probably won't end up with a powdery finish, but because of the ingredients that we use to make the homemade, it does leave kind of like a little starchy powder on it, and that's okay. Again, if you want to use marker, you can use marker, crayon, whatever materials you have at home to add color. But that's your next and final step. Hope you are staying creative. Remember, you are not required to submit any images or final work. However, if you'd like to share, I'd love to see your work. So hope you're staying creative and hope to see you soon.